Dear Presidente Cabrera, members of the selection committee, the Allen family, the Glenn Family Foundation, distinguished guests, it is an honor to stand before you today and receive the Ivan Allen Jr. Prize for Social Courage on behalf of my mother, María Corina Machado. She should be standing here today accepting this recognition herself, but the dictatorship in my country has barred her from leaving Venezuela for more than a decade. Today, she's in hiding, in complete isolation for more than 6 months, and with constant threats to her life. Now, I don't know where my mother is at this very moment, nor when we'll see her again. So I cherish this opportunity to honor her courage and her values, which have not only shaped my life, but the life of millions of Venezuelans. Now, my mother never intended to be a politician, but when Venezuela, once the strongest democracy in Latin America, began to crumble under the Chavista regime, when our institutions collapsed, opportunities vanished, repression took hold, and a crisis that has displaced more than 8 million people, a quarter of a population, María Corina felt compelled to act. And she did so not out of ambition, but out of a firm commitment to dignity, freedom, and justice. And since this moment on, she has never stopped fighting. It was around 2004, about 20 years ago, when I truly understood the depth of her convictions. I remember clearly the night before she was ordered to appear in front of a corrupt prosecutor with false accusations of conspiracy and treason. She was facing a possible 12-year prison sentence, and I was only 13 years old. That night, she sat beside me, held my hand, and explained she would hand herself in, despite many advising her not to. We understood the risks, and we knew very well the corruption she would face in the prosecution. So at that moment, I naturally felt despair, not knowing what would become of her. But looking into my eyes, and with a conviction I had never witnessed before, she explained she was doing this for my future, the future of my 2 younger brothers, Ricardo and Enrique, and the future of our country. It is at that moment that I understood she was fighting for something far greater than herself, so great that she was willing to risk her own freedom in the pursuit of freedom for all Venezuelans. If there is one thing I learned from my mother, is that courage and truth and hope are our most powerful weapons in disarming evil. That courage is not a virtue to be used only when it's convenient, non-controversial, or safe, but rather its true test lies in the darkest of times, when standing for what is right might mean standing alone, might mean alienating allies, and even risking your own life. 4 years, my mother stood alone. She called the Venezuela regime a criminal state when nobody else dared to say it. She stood firm in the National Assembly and confronted Hugo Chavez, telling him that his expropriations of businesses were theft. She spoke up to the Venezuelan people of the dignity of hard work in a country used to free government handouts in exchange for unquestionable loyalty. She was not intimidated when my grandfather's company, his life work, was threatened and later expropriated in exchange for her silence. And she remains steady even today when my grandmother's home is surrounded by armed intelligence police. For her courage, my mother has been called extremist, radical, crazy. She has been brutally assaulted, persecuted, and kidnapped, but she has not relented. Ivan Allen Jr. knew well what it meant to stand against the status quo, to fight for what is right, despite the costs. But most importantly, he knew that showing moral courage in defense of truth and what is right is contagious. And that is what my mother has ignited in Venezuela. An unstoppable force, not grounded in violence or strength, but in love for country. 2 years ago, nobody would have believed what we achieved in Venezuela, and you've heard a bit of it today. This, against all odds, despite the intimidation, the dangers, the obstacles imposed by the regime, millions of Venezuelans went out to the polls on July 28th of last year and delivered a historic victory against the dictatorship of Nicolás Maduro, with almost 70% of the votes on our side and the official tally sheets to prove it. We built a historic movement unlike anything in our nation's history that transcended social classes, political ideologies, divisions. There was no longer Chavistas versus opposition, poor versus rich, right versus left. There was just one nation united, demanding its freedom. My mother speaks of an existential fight that goes beyond defending a presidential election. She talks about a battle for human dignity, the reunification of families, and the freedom of a nation. It is a fight that is waged first in our hearts and in our minds. And that is why we have already defeated the dictatorship. Let there be no doubt, we have already won. We have won because our strength lies in an unwavering commitment to defending truth, because good will prevail over evil, and because we have conquered fear once and for all. My mother has shown us the way, and it takes courage to fight for your convictions and to stand for what is right. She has shown us the way, not the easy one, but the honorable one. And in doing so, she will lead us until the end, until we are free. Thank you.